They're getting some breaking news in the investigation into the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie.
The investigation shifted the moment reporters stopped returning to the same crime scene and started showing up somewhere else entirely. Not at the Catalina Foothills home where Nancy Guthrie vanished in the early morning hours. Not at the entrance investigators failed to fully secure during the first critical window. Not at the church where her absence was first noticed the following Sunday. They went to the property connected to the man federal agents had been quietly returning to behind closed doors. And when evidence technicians began removing items from inside that home, something changed in how this case felt to everyone watching it. Because suddenly this no longer looked like a stranger appearing from nowhere. It looked like someone who already knew where everything was. For the first several weeks after Nancy Guthrie disappeared, the public was working inside a frame that investigators had initially handed to the media. A home invasion. A nighttime abduction. A violent intrusion inside a quiet upscale neighborhood where residents believed they were insulated from this kind of thing. And the early evidence seemed to support that framing. Blood near the entrance. An elderly woman gone. A camera physically removed from the wall. An unexplained gap of hours before anyone confirmed something was wrong. Everything about the surface narrative pushed people toward imagining a stranger, masked, armed, emerging from darkness and disappearing back into it. But investigators noticed something almost immediately that quietly disturbed them. The scene did not feel chaotic. That observation matters more than it sounds. Experienced crime scene analysts understand that random offenders leave randomness behind. Panic. Improvisation. Broken sequences. Sloppy exits. Unexpected errors. This scene felt controlled. That word appeared repeatedly in private conversations among analysts following the investigation. Controlled movement. Controlled timing. A controlled operational window. Everything surrounding the disappearance suggested someone who understood the environment before they ever arrived. And once investigators began examining relationships rather than just the physical scene, the direction of the case changed very quickly. Because the last confirmed person to see Nancy Guthrie alive was not a stranger. It was her own son-in-law. That single fact changed the emotional structure of the investigation almost immediately. To be precise, being the last known person with a victim does not establish guilt. Families drive elderly relatives home every day. Ordinary life produces ordinary timelines. But investigators are trained to examine sequences rather than isolated moments. And the sequence here became increasingly difficult to set aside. Nancy spent the evening with family. Dinner, conversation, routine. Nothing publicly suggested conflict. Nothing outwardly indicated danger. But once she left and returned home, the timeline entered a gap with no independent verification. No rideshare data. No third-party timestamp. No external confirmation of what happened once she arrived. Only recollection. And recollection becomes unstable the moment investigators start applying pressure to it. That is why the timeline surrounding her return home became one of the most intensely examined portions of the entire case. What time did she enter the residence? Who walked her inside? How long did anyone remain on the property? Were lights visible afterward? Investigators reconstructed every minute carefully because the operational window surrounding the disappearance appeared unusually precise. And then something else emerged that changed the emotional direction entirely. The pacemaker monitoring data stopped transmitting during the early morning hours. That detail hit investigators hard because now they had something more reliable than memory. Technology confirming that at some point during the night, Nancy Guthrie was no longer where she was supposed to be. That narrowed the operational window dramatically. And when investigators placed that narrowed timeline beside another uncomfortable reality, the sequence became far more troubling. No meaningful overnight communication. No check-ins, no calls, no texts, no interruption of any kind from anyone connected to her. Alone, those gaps prove nothing. Adults do not monitor elderly relatives around the clock. Families forget to call. Ordinary life creates ordinary silences. But context changes interpretation. Investigators knew Nancy Guthrie was elderly. They knew she removed her hearing aids before sleeping. They knew she lived alone with no overnight caregiver. And they knew whoever entered that house moved with confidence. That combination became impossible to dismiss because operational competence inside a crime scene almost always comes from one of two places: prior experience or prior information. And investigators appeared increasingly unwilling to believe this level of operational success came purely from chance. The surveillance footage deepened those concerns further. The masked figure approaching the residence in the early morning hours appeared purposeful, controlled, efficient. No hesitation near entry points. No visible confusion about the property layout. No wasted movement. Strangers unfamiliar with a location lose time orienting themselves. They pause. They recalibrate. This individual appeared comfortable. And comfort implies familiarity. Familiarity does not automatically mean family. Neighbors, contractors, anyone with repeated access could theoretically possess operational knowledge of the property. But the deeper investigators moved into the timeline, the more one specific possibility kept surfacing. Someone may have understood exactly how vulnerable Nancy Guthrie had become long before the night she disappeared. That realization changed everything because the residence had several layers of vulnerability that investigators later considered significant. No active overnight monitoring. No caregiver. Inconsistent camera coverage. No hearing aids once she was asleep. To ordinary observers, those details sounded tragic. To investigators, they sounded exploitable. And if someone close to Nancy understood all of those vulnerabilities simultaneously, then the disappearance no longer felt emotionally random. It felt optimized. That word, optimized, is what pushed investigators toward motive analysis. And motive analysis led quietly but directly toward financial pressure. Reports began circulating that conversations involving money had occurred before the disappearance. No official document confirmed every detail publicly. But emotionally, the effect was immediate. The final dinner no longer felt neutral. Every interaction surrounding that last evening suddenly carried weight. The goodbye. The drive home. The overnight silence. Everything became heavier. Then came the detail that transformed public perception permanently. Investigators subpoenaed digital records connected to searches involving Nancy Guthrie's address conducted months before her disappearance. That information became explosive because now the investigation contained potential evidence of pre-event reconnaissance. Image searches alone prove nothing. People search addresses constantly. But timing matters. Sequence matters. And investigators reportedly believed those searches reflected operational preparation rather than innocent curiosity. If someone researched that property repeatedly in the months before she vanished, then the crime may not have begun that night at all. It may have been developing slowly, quietly, beneath the surface of ordinary family life. The ransom notes added another layer of disturbance. Multiple notes reached not only family members but media organizations. Analysts studying the communication patterns noted something that deeply unsettled behavioral experts following the case. The language appeared psychologically informed. The pressure points targeted the family specifically. The messaging felt personal rather than generic. Strangers threatened broadly. Familiar people threatened specifically. And the deeper investigators moved into behavioral analysis, the more the offender profile pointed away from randomness and toward intimate knowledge of the family's emotional structure. Federal investigators reportedly constructed a behavioral profile that kept returning to the same characteristics: organized, patient, emotionally controlled under pressure, capable of sustained long-term planning, comfortable operating inside the victim's environment. That profile, combined with the timeline, the digital records, the financial dimension, the operational familiarity, and the post-disappearance behavior, created something investigators call cumulative gravity. No single detail proves a case. But sequences tell stories. And this sequence kept pointing in the same direction regardless of which thread investigators pulled. The public felt that momentum building. Every forensic update, every federal subpoena, every withheld detail felt like pressure tightening behind closed doors. People were no longer simply watching a missing person investigation. They were watching what appeared to be a careful prosecutorial structure being assembled piece by piece. And the most haunting part was never the violence or the masked figure or the missing camera. It was the familiarity. Because once every piece was placed beside the next, the disappearance stopped feeling like something that arrived suddenly in the night. It started feeling like something that had been approaching quietly for a very long time. And investigators appeared to already know exactly where to look.